What's up, guys? Welcome back to the 65 movement. Haven't seen y'all in months. As you can see, I'm on my middle of the night kick again. It's kind of weird to come back 2 months later and do a middle of the night in my pajamas podcast. But this is on my brain. This wasn't planned. This is something that happened to me yesterday, and I just have to get it out. So the name of this podcast is going to be Suicide by Salt. And I'm really kicking myself. I'm gonna just be honest with y'all. Thou Shalt Eat Your Way Out is a really good book in terms of helping people move towards eating a healthier diet that can help them serve God's purpose and kind of live longer and really live instead of just being alive. Oh, and by the way, this is 65 Movement. My name is Dr. Eric Petty. I don't know if I said that. Um, it's been a while. If you guys don't know me, 65book.com on Instagram. I'm Rusty. 65book.com on Facebook. I'm sorry, and the 65 Movement on Instagram. In any case, Suicide by Salt. And I know what everybody's going to say. I don't use salt. That is what I hear all the time now. I see a lot of patients who are suffering from lower extremity edema, heart disease, high blood pressure, all types of different things, and a lot of them are on low salt diets. And the first thing you'll always hear them say is, "I don't use salt." And at this point, I don't think anybody actually has a salt shaker in their house. I've not seen any salt shakers. I don't have a salt shaker. We have some pink Himalayan salt, but we use that very sparingly. Only time I see salt shakers is if you go to a restaurant. I don't think anybody actually puts salt on things anymore. So I want y'all to make sure that y'all know, and even if this is not for you, this message might not be for you. It might be for something you need to pass on, because these are generally older senior citizens, not significantly older, but in their 60s, late 50s, that are really like killing themselves with salt, and they don't even know it. So I had a lady, and she's been in and out of the hospital to the point where her legs are weeping. And for those who don't know what weeping means, it means her legs have become so swollen that the fluid starts to drip out. So not like they're sweating, but fluid from inside of her legs starts to burst out of her legs. This lady's in like her early 60s, maybe mid 60s. In any case, she's too young to have that going. She's going in and out of the hospital. She's elevating her legs, doing all the stuff that they tell her to do. They keep telling her, you got to lower your salt. And she keeps saying, well, I don't eat any salt. So I said, okay, let's go to your pantry. Let's go to your kitchen and let's see what you're eating. And it's amazing that I'm sure there are some nutritionists that do this, but it's amazing how many people don't even know the translation that your salt is your sodium. So we got to start there. I know most of y'all probably know this, but we got to start there. I did not break this down in Thou Shalt Eat Your Way Out the way I wanted to. So I want to make sure I'm breaking this down properly so this can be passed along. Salt and sodium are the same thing. Let's start at that basic thing. But then what we need to do is we need to look at the percentages on these cans and on these boxes. I'm going to go through a few things. I guess fortunately for us, we don't have a lot of like high salt things in here. We don't even have a lot of packaging in our house. A lot of the food we buy is fresh. The other food my wife takes out and puts it into a clear container. So we don't have any labels. So I got what I could. But unfortunate for most, we don't look at this. So I don't know if this is going to be close enough. Let me see if I can get it real close, where you see sodium. And what you really want to look at is the percentage. So like on this, it says 29%. I don't know if the light is hitting that right. This is organic vegetarian chili. It says 29% of your sodium is 2 servings per container in this can. So that means if I was to eat this whole can, I would end up with 58% of my sodium for the day, because it's 29% per serving and there's 2 servings in the can. So this brings me back to this lady. The first thing I found was seasoned pinto beans. And these seasoned pinto beans were 31% per serving. She was getting 31% of her sodium per serving, and there were 3.5 servings in the can. So here she was like, oh, I don't eat that much of them. I just pour them in. I pour 2 cans into a thing and warm them up, and then I just scoop my bowl in. And what we found out is she's eating about 2 servings of these pinto beans with like some crackers and some other stuff kind of mixed in it. But those 2 servings of those pinto beans was giving her 62% of her sodium for the day. The few little crackers she was having had another 10% of her sodium. So in one sitting, she was getting 70+% of her sodium for the entire day. So it's important that we just make this simple. We don't want to go over 100% for the day. So if I decide to eat this whole can and get to 58% of my sodium for the day, I only have 42% left. Say next I decide to have, and this doesn't make any sense in order, but next I decide to have some of this vanilla almond cereal. I have to look on it and see that it's 3% of my sodium per serving. So maybe I have 1 serving of this. Now I add 3%. I got some lightly salted potato chips. These only have 3% per serving, but you know, who eats 1 serving of potato chips? Maybe I eat a couple servings of this. I have another 6% of my sodium coming from that. Garbanzo beans, 6% per serving. This is the exact size can she had of her pinto beans. And it also has the same exact serving breakdown. 3.5 servings in this can. But these are only 6% sodium per serving. So if I was to eat this whole can, I would only still be looking at about 21% of my sodium for the day. With her, she eats the whole can of these seasoned pinto beans. She would be over 100% just with that can because it was 31% per serving. So she would be looking at, 110% of her sodium just in that one can. So it starts with buying the wrong foods. Anytime you see something that says seasoned, we went through her freezer afterwards and she had a lot of stuff with sauces. Anytime you see seasoned or anytime you see something in a sauce, you need to look at that sodium carefully because that's generally where you're getting all that sodium or that salt from. And you know, she had Hot Pockets in her freezer. She had steak in her freezer. She had pork chops in her freezer. All of these things are super high in sodium. So I'm a doctor of physical therapy for those who don't know, but this physical therapy assessment turned completely into a nutrition assessment. And what we did is I went back like through 2 days of her eating, and on average, she was getting in 300+% of her sodium for the day. That is death or suicide by salt right there. She was literally killing herself. She was wondering why her legs keep swelling up and why she had to keep going back to the hospital. But she was literally killing herself with her food. Eating seasoned pinto beans, salty crackers with peanut butter. She had these, and I used to eat these before we were plant-based. She had these big, giant, chunky soup. I don't know if you go to the supermarket, they got these big, giant, chunky soup cans. The corn chowder one and the chicken noodle one. All of those have usually about 33 to 40% of sodium per serving. And it's usually 2 servings per can. So if you're like me, you're not eating a half a can of that soup. You're eating the whole can because it's not really that filling if you eat a half a can. So if I eat that whole can of soup, more than likely I'm getting 70 to 80% of my sodium in just that can of soup. Now, if I eat a piece of meat, a piece of chicken, a bacon, a sausage, or anything else, or even just some lightly salted chips after that, there's a good chance that I'm going to go over 100% of my sodium for the day. So I know I kind of went into this fast, but I just want to really review. We have to turn this over and look at these nutrition facts. We have to go down to sodium. Now, if you're someone who wants to calculate the milligrams, so like this has 690 milligrams per serve, and you want to calculate that into 2,300 and try to count up to 2,300 for the day, which is the recommended amount of sodium for the day, then you can. But I think it's much easier to count to 100. Okay, so I always go by the percentage. And if you're someone, if you're just a normal person with no real issues, we need to keep that at 100 or lower. If you're somebody with high blood pressure, if you're somebody with congestive heart failure, if you're somebody with swollen legs, just simplify it to that. If you are swollen, if you are retaining fluid, you need to be trying to keep that number far under 100%. If not, you are literally killing yourself. Your blood pressure is going up. Your heart is going to struggle. You're going to have a hard time breathing. So this lady she was retaining so much fluid that, I mean, she was tiptoeing around her apartment because her feet were so swollen and she couldn't really put the pressure on them. But then beyond that, she couldn't breathe because when you get that fluid starts coming up your legs. It starts getting into your torso. It starts making it harder for your lungs to expand because you're retaining so much fluid. So you're literally committing suicide by salt. Okay? But there is no salt. There's no salt shakers. She didn't even have any seasoning. She wasn't even putting any seasoning on her food. But what she was doing is she was trusting the food industry to give her decent food without her having to do the work and think about it. She was trusting the food industry with giving her something decent that wouldn't kill her. But you cannot do that. You cannot trust the food industry to do the legwork for you. You have to do your legwork for yourself. So unfortunately, I have a lady who's on, low income, whose family goes out and goes shopping for her. And now she's got a whole kitchen full of stuff that I don't think she should eat. Now I'm gonna help her out as much as I can from a mental standpoint. I'm all on that cliche line of teaching a person how to fish instead of bringing them fish. So I gave her a lot of information. I gave her a lot of different options that she can do. I really just told her she should throw that food away or give it away to someone who doesn't have a problem with salt, because almost everything in her home, every single meal she was eating was packed with salt. I'm talking about from instant grits to cereal, to the bread she was eating, to the peanut butter she had, to the soups, to the beans, to the Hot Pockets, to the toaster strudels. I mean, everything was packed with salt. And I want you guys to understand that it's not just the things that seem like they would have salt in them, like chips. Like, obviously, I get a lightly salted chip because you think of chips, then you think of salt. But it's the things that are sneaky that you got to watch out for, where you think, oh, I'm good, and you don't realize that your candy bar has salt in it. When you don't realize that your Pop-Tart has salt in it, if anybody's still eating Pop-Tarts. When you don't realize that your cereal has salt in it. I mean, this cereal only has 3% per serving, but there are some other cereals that pack a good amount of salt. There's a lot of sodium put in stuff to give you that taste. There's a lot of evidence that says that, that combination of sodium and sugar is really what keeps us coming back. It's really what gets us addicted to food. So I had to get this off my brain. I don't even know if I'm officially back. I think I might actually take another month or two and just, I shouldn't say chill, because for y'all, those of you who do not know, I'm out here every day, doing what I'm doing here, but I'm just doing it 1-on-1 or 1-on-5 or 1-on-10 or whatever. But, I had to get this one off because I was like, why did I not talk about, I should have had a chapter in here called Suicide by Salt. I should have had that. If I do a second one, or maybe if I just do an addendum to it, I might release a new one. But I needed to get that information out because it's probably not you. I mean, I know my demographic on here. For you guys who are watching, I know my demographic. It's probably not you who's going to really be suffering from this. But for those of you listening on the podcast, I also know that demographic. This is probably you. And I know you can't see this video, but I need you to turn all your stuff over. Look for sodium, especially if you're one of those people that's suffering from swelling, heart disease, hypertension, or high blood pressure. Even AFib, atrial fibrillation, any of those heart issues, any blood clot issues, any swelling issues, I need you to start looking at the sodium on your stuff. Stop telling people I don't eat salt, because you do. You just don't realize that it's called sodium. And you don't realize that the food industry at some point decided fat was the enemy. Everybody is trying to stay away from fat. So now we'll pack your foods with salt and sugar. And there's a price to pay if you put too much fat in the foods, and there's a price to pay if you put too much salt in the foods and too much sugar in the foods. And unfortunately, there's a lot of people out there paying that price, and they don't even realize it. So that's my message. I'm concerned with this lady. I've been concerned with this before, but this was a highlighted one, and I just know that this is a big issue. So if this is not an issue for you personally, I need you to do what I just did with you, with your mom, your dad, your grandma, your auntie, your uncle. Because this lady talked about. Here's the crazy part. This lady talked about while she was in the hospital, her phone was getting blown up with all these voicemails that she couldn't check, and her son had to prepare her because while she was in the hospital, she was calling her sister. I'm not sure if it was really her sister, but she lived next door to her. She died from congestive heart failure. Her sister, her so-called sister, died, who lived right next to her, died from congestive heart failure while this lady was in the hospital with congestive heart failure. Her sister died from her legs got so swollen, she got to a point where she couldn't breathe, and she actually died. Then this lady went on to tell me about her son, who is over 300 pounds, just got diagnosed with congestive heart failure, already has diabetes. And she told me how she was big mama, and before COVID, everybody would come to her house and eat, and she was the person that everybody came to, and she would make this stuff that she was showing me, these seasoned pinto beans and all this stuff. This has to stop. These grandma's recipes, I do have a chapter in there called Grandma's Recipes in the book, Thou Shalt Eat Your Way Out. These grandma's recipes have to stop, because this big mama, as she called herself, was bringing all her kids, her 300-pound son included, with diabetes and congestive heart failure, her sister next door who just died from congestive heart failure, and whoever else she didn't mention in her family. She was bringing all these people in her family to her apartment and feeding them hundreds of percent of sodium. So not only is she committing suicide by salt, but now she's murdering people with salt. She's making these dishes that are filled with salt, and these people's blood pressure. She's having people walk out of her house with high blood pressure. And I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of us are doing this. I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of us aren't going to our grandparents' homes on Thanksgiving and Christmas and walking out with high blood pressure, swelling in our feet. I was guilty of it. I used to have people over for July 4th all the time and fix them racks of ribs and wings and burgers. And I'm positive that all of us, 100% of us, were sitting in that room with our blood pressure at least 20 points higher from the foods that we had eaten. But we have to stop this. And at that point, I was just like this lady. I had a doctorate degree, but I wasn't looking at the back of my packages and looking at sodium. I was just like, oh, I don't put salt on my food. Or I was getting some type of seasoned salt that didn't have any actual salt in it. And I thought that was enough. But I wasn't thinking, oh, this rib has this much sodium in it. Oh, this sauce has this much sodium in it. So I need us to really, really think on that. I apologize if I'm stepping on any nutritionists, if I'm stepping on y'all toes. But we all have to do better, because I see a lot of people right now. I see anywhere between, 5 and 15 people a day. That's how wide of a range it is. And nobody knows this stuff. And these are 60 to 90-year-olds. How are we 60 to 90 years old and nobody knows to turn over and look at sodium and translate that into how much salt they're having? And if you look like me, you definitely don't know it. So we got to do better. Pass this podcast around, pass this video around, and just let's do better. Let's stop killing ourselves with salt. Let's stop the suicide by salt. We can have another conversation about sugar. We can have another conversation about fat. But I would argue that the salt is probably the sneakiest one. When I used to do a MyFitnessPal app, that was the one that I really struggled to stay under 100%. It's so sneaky. So it's a little bit easier to realize that, okay, I've eaten a lot of sugar today or I've eaten a lot of fat. But that salt is so sneaky. So I need you to watch the sodium, watch the salt, and let's just do better. All right, let me see if now that I've woken up, I'm a little bit more awake. Let me see if I can get this right. 65 Movement on Instagram, 65book.com on Facebook. I don't know why I have not changed that to the same name for both yet. I think Facebook was giving me a problem. It needs to be the 65 Movement everywhere, but it's not. So 65book.com on Facebook, 65 Movement on Instagram. Email is drpetty65@gmail.com. Spell out the doctor. You can get your copy of Thou Shalt Eat Your Way Out with me at 65book.com. Get your copy of 65, which also has a chapter called Thou Shalt Eat Your Way Out in it, at 65book.com. You can also get it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, all that good stuff, Walmart, whoever. I think that's it. 65 Movement Podcast. Hopefully y'all will subscribe, review, and blah, 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 blah. All that stuff that other people say, go for it. And if you don't do it, all that stuff doesn't really matter to me. What matters to me most is that you take this information in and ask yourself, is this information that I need, or do I know someone else that needs this, and then pass it on to them. You don't have to pass it on through my podcast, but I need you to take the information and regurgitate it to them, because this stuff has to stop. That's all that matters to me. I know I say, subscribe and like and review and share. Who cares at the end of the day? I don't care what Apple thinks or whoever else. And to be honest, I don't even care if y'all buy the books. I do want you to get the information. So whether you get the information through the books or whether you get the information through the podcast, whether you get the information through an email if you have some questions or something, I need y'all to take this information and pass it around. I need you to take this seed and then replant it thousands of times all around. So the next time I walk, or next year when I'm walking in people's homes and I'm talking about, I'm hearing them say, I don't eat salt, that they already know, okay, yeah, I know, I got to look at the back of the can. It's sodium. Somebody told me about that. I know I need to keep it under 100%. Somebody told me about that. That's what that is my dream for life, is that I start going in patients' homes and things that I'm talking about on here, not necessarily that it has to come from me, but things that I'm talking about on here start to change, that they start to know that that's too much salt per serving and I need to put that back on the shelf. That's what needs to change. So that's what I give y'all all those handles and stuff so you can kind of follow me and get more information. But all that really matters is the information. All that really matters is that we can live and serve God's purpose for our lives without having swollen legs, shortness of breath, people dying, diabetes, congestive heart failure. We gotta be tired of this by now. So I'm tired of it. And I'm tired in general because it's like 4 something. And for those who don't know, I got a new puppy, so ain't gonna be no videos no time soon unless they happen around this time because it's too much going on otherwise. But I hope y'all are doing well. I know this COVID is running rampant, so I hope you and your family are well. I hope y'all are staying blessed. I've been very blessed that, most of my family, my close loved ones have been well. So starting to ramble on just because I haven't seen y'all in a while. I haven't talked to y'all in a while. But just God bless. Take care of yourself. Let's take care of our health and take care of all this stuff. Let's not let COVID totally distract us to everything else because, it's not. I don't go a day without seeing a COVID patient at this point. I've had full days of all COVID patients at this point. But even with that said, even with the news becoming almost singularly focused on COVID, it's people out here dying from a whole bunch of other stuff. So heart disease has not taken a break. In fact, it's probably ramped up. It's probably teamed up with COVID to kill more people. Diabetes has not taken a break. These other diseases are not taking a break. So I don't want y'all to get so singularly focused on COVID that you're eating seasoned pinto beans and 100% of your sodium in one sitting. We got to be focused on everything. We got to be focused on that salt intake, that sugar intake, that fat intake, our exercise, our mental well-being, our finances. I mean, we got to be focused on a lot of different things. And, you know, hopefully you can kind of piece it all together with different experts. I did a post where I kind of referred you guys to who I feel is the best person to teach you about investments, the investing tutor, Hans Boateng. Referred you towards my who I call my friend tour, and kind of like the spiritual. You know, I at this point I guess I got three pastors, but this Chip is not really just a pastor to me, because I've never seen him preach a sermon, but he's more of a friend. But you know, he's probably the biggest spiritual guide in my life. So you guys need to find a spiritual person that guides you and helps you and always pulls you back towards the word. You got to find a financial person who, you know, I can just look at posts from Hans and get a little seed that'll make me make a better investment for today. I mean, since I did some investment stuff with him, my finances are, you know, those little rocket ships, that little rocket emoji. And we all need that. And then hopefully for the rest of you, I am that for when it comes to health and nutrition. That's my goal. I want to be like they are in their realms, how Chip is in the spiritual realm, how Hans is in the financial realm. I want to be that for you when it comes to health and nutrition, exercise and what you eat and how you do and how you're going to live longer. We need that. We need those mentors in our life so that we can be complete and not get too over focused on one thing. So it's never going to be a time where I don't say, oh, I got to read my Bible. I got to get in this word, because I know Chip's going to send me something that's going to pull me back in and remind me. It's never going to be a time where I'm going to get dumb when it comes to financials, because I know I'm going to see a post from Hans that's going to remind me, like, I'm not paying that 3% debt off when I can make 100% with that money. Doesn't make any sense. And then hopefully you guys can look at me and say, I'm not going to eat 100% of my sodium in one sitting, because I know how to turn this can over, look for sodium and look for the percent. I'm not going to let my grandma, I'm not going to let my mom, I'm not going to let my dad do those things, because I understand that sodium can give me high blood pressure, heart disease, and kill me. All right. I've rambled on enough. 65 movement. God bless y'all. Love y'all.